Ladies all around the world, listen up. We're looking for you. The time has come to be unstoppable together. The danger of executive women is worrying we're not enough, obsessed with perfection and failing to perform. You're in the right place. It's now time to be unstoppable together with Connie Fife. She was the director of the United States Chamber of Commerce and CEO of Girl Scouts USA. Sit down, squat down, or lie down. It's time for Up or Out, all business with Connie Fife, your unstoppable diva and chair of the Fife Group, helping women in leadership achieve excellence and be unstoppable together.
Hello, this is Connie Fife, your unstoppable diva, and you're listening to Up or Out with Connie. We can be heard on iTunes, iHeartRadio, SiriusXM, the C-Suite Network, and over 1,900 global networks. I mean, that is taking our numbers up to like 5 million per week. I mean, it's huge. The show continues to grow, and thank you to all of our listeners for making that happen. And if you haven't, please make sure that you do subscribe. Head on over to iTunes, subscribe, because you don't want to miss any of the good stuff. Do you have a desire to move up in the boardroom, be heard in the C-suites, or go out and be that entrepreneur that you've only been dreaming of? Well, we got all that right here for you on Up or Out with Connie. So before we go to break, I want to share my quote for today, which is, success is not a failure. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And that's by Winston Churchill. So let's take a really quick sponsor break. We'll be right back with today's guest. Hi, this is Connie Fife, your unstoppable diva, your host of Up or Out with Connie. I am thrilled to be a headline show on C-Suite Network, where you can grow your brand, grow your tribe, and be unstoppable. We are the hottest podcast for entrepreneurs, C-level executives, and market leaders. And you can hear me each week right here on the C-Suite Network. Also on Conscious Business Network, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SiriusXM, and over 900 stations around the globe. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Be bold, be connected, and be unstoppable. And we're back, and you're listening to Up or Out with Connie. I want you to really turn up the volume today, because I have a delightful and incredibly special guest on with me today. So he was referred to my show just recently, and I'm looking, and I know this guy. Well, it turns out we know each other from a previous life, from when I was director at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And you're going to find out in a minute how I know him. But, it's a small world, and it just went full circle. And I think it's 20 years later that we're connecting. Well, it has to be at least 20 years, maybe even a little bit longer, that we're reconnecting. So on with our unstoppable guest. He is the founder of the Washington Speakers Bureau. He developed that in his closet. He's leading the largest lecture agency in the world, representing world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, secretaries of state, sports legends, great achievers of all kinds. He's an author of What Made Me Who I Am, which is really prevalent to what we talk about on Up or Out. Who made us what we are, and why are we here? And then he is the author of that book, What Made Me Who I Am. So welcome to Up or Out with Connie, Mr. Bernie Swain. Hey, Bernie, how are you?
I'm good, Connie. How are you?
I'm doing well. So everybody out there, if you haven't figured it out yet how we know each other, I was at the U.S. Chamber booking speakers. Before I became a speaker, I was on the backside. And this gentleman right here was head of the Washington Speakers Bureau. So I had the privilege of meeting with him and working with him on a lot of fabulous events that we had there in Washington.
It's funny how things turn out, isn't it?
I know. I totally turned 90 degrees, we're doing something totally different. So you yourself, entrepreneurism, let's talk about that for a minute, and then how that leads into your book of What Made Me Who I Am. So entrepreneurism, that's what you are. You created the Speakers Bureau in your closet.
Right.
So,
Well,
it's a big closet.
let me give you a little background because I think this is important for anybody who wants to go into business for themselves.
Sure.
No one in my family ever attended college before. My mother's side of the family were farmers in West Virginia. My father lived in the poorest of mining towns in West Virginia and grew up in a 2-room house with 5 sisters, a brother, and assorted relatives. And when my grandmother couldn't always take care of him, spent part of his childhood in an orphanage. So I wasn't expected to go to college. My parents, good people, but there was never any conversation about college. And I had a mentor in high school, a teacher who encouraged me to go. And I wanted to be just like him. By the time I was 36 years old, I had been offered the job of athletic director at George Washington University. And it was my dream job. And so at the same time, someone sent me a copy of Fortune magazine, and in that magazine was an article about the largest lecture agency at the time, where the owner of the lecture agency had just walked into the Gerald Ford White House and picked up Henry Kissinger and Alexander Haig and as clients. And near the end of the article, Henry Kissinger is quoted as complaining about the high commission rate that this agency wanted to charge and says, well, why don't I sign with one of your competitors? And the head of the agency said, I have no competitors. So I took the article home and I left it on the coffee table planning to read the rest of the magazine. And my wife had read it. And one day I came home, she said, you come home several days a week complaining about the bureaucracy of university life. And I don't think you'll ever be happy until you make decisions on your own. So she pushed and she prodded me and convinced me to walk away from my dream job before I even started, and convinced me with no plan, no experience, and no money to start this lecture agency.
Wow.
And so the closet was actually, we had no money to get an office. So we had a friend named Chuck Hagel who was in Alexandria, Virginia, and he was a friend, and he rented us his stationery closet. And Chuck was later become the Secretary of Defense for Barack Obama. And in order to leave our stationery closet, you had to walk through Chuck's office. So we'd have to sit in the closet until one of Chuck's meetings to be over just to leave. And I remember at the time, to talk about, adversity, your quote about adversity is that my wife got pregnant at the time. And so we would often just have to sit in that closet and wait for Chuck's meetings to be over just to get out of there.
You had to find something to do.
Right. So as I said, we had no experience doing this. So we were hoping to represent famous people. And so people who go out and speak, the kind of people you described. So we sat there and we would think of famous names, and we'd try to get a telephone number or an address, and none of our phone calls were ever returned. Our letters were returned from lawyers who said, my client, this famous person, is under a written contract. Don't write them again or we'll sue you. So we sat in that closet for 14 months, and finally one speaker who had been under a written contract, and that contract had expired. They hadn't produced for him. I had let him use the swimming pool when I was at the university, and he called me on the phone and wanted to be represented, and that's how we started.
That was going to be a question, because that's a question everyone wants to know. How do you get that first break? Get someone to say yes. And I think you just said it. It was the networking. You knew him otherwise besides presenting him and pitching to him and trying to get something. It was building that relationship.
I think everything, anytime you're in business for yourself, it is all about you. It's all about the branding that you do. If I run a coffee shop, it's my relationship with the customers who come in and buy coffee. If I run a speakers bureau, it's just, I'm not representing famous people. I'm networking with not only the famous people that I represent, but customers, and people like you, and making friendships with those people and letting them know the kind of person I am. And that networking, I think, is the most important thing to entrepreneurism.
It really is, because you don't have that big business behind you. And, there's times when people will say, well, gee, you have a small shop. Why would I want to work with you? So it's again, building those relationships. And again, many of the relationships that I've had at the U.S. Chamber, I've circled back to a lot of them, and they've helped me grow my business because of the relationships that I had. But you said something I want to jump back to really quick. We have another similarity or connection. I am also the first person in my family who went to college.
Right.
And, my family's from the Appalachian Mountains. And, even when I said I was going to college, like people looked at me like deer in the headlights. You're doing what?
Right. And I think that's important for people to understand. It's not our synergism about none of our family ever went to college is an example of where you start in life today. I mean, it doesn't make any difference whether your family ever went to college before. What it says is that we can start from anywhere in life and be successful.
Exactly. And, and we started from this place right here. I mean, our history is our history. And I've heard the saying, your past is your present. But I know for me, I use my past to make me stronger, to want to do things and want to do more. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Right. And it's, I know for me, it's made my family proud that, yes, we have somebody who went to college, and now the generations after me, all of my nieces and nephews and my own children have all gone to college. They all have master's degrees now. So that's really, really important.
And that's very important for people to understand. Is that today, I think, especially today, when people are saying that our children are not going to do better than we've done in life, I don't want people to get discouraged because they think they're coming from a place where they're going to have a hard time reaching success and accomplishment in life, because you can start from anywhere and be successful. Right.
You can go anywhere. Some of my history, like my grandfather, he created the McDonald's Golden Arches.
Wow.
And again, he came from the Appalachian Mountains. They had nothing. Now, granted, when my grandmother had four babies, by the time she was 23, my grandfather had left the family to find his fame and fortune. And that was the one thing that he had done. And then later, many years later, he came back to the family. But he found his success that way. And my hope is that we do pass it down to the next generation to say, you can work for this. You can make it happen. You can start somewhere, just to, like you said, just to let them know that it's not that no one went to college before me. It's everything that's going to happen now going forward. So hope that it makes that difference.
Absolutely. I totally agree with it.
Yes. And that was that turning point. And I know you wanted to talk too about that turning point in life where it really makes a difference, and that turning point, and when we have the passion to keep on going forward. So what was that for you? Well,
it was several things. Let me explain what a turning point is. A turning point basically is a fork in the road. Mm-hmm. The Yogi Berra, who was the great catcher for the New York Yankees, once said, "We get to a fork in the road. I get to a fork in the road, and I take it." Right. Unfortunately, that's what most of us do. We get to a fork in the road and we don't pay attention to whether we're going to the right side or left side. Right. We just zip right past it and ignore it. That mentor for me in high school was a fork in the road. I could have paid attention to what he said, or I could have ignored it. And I went on a 17-year career in athletics in order to, because of his inspiration. Right. My wife, when she told me that I was not going to be happy making decisions unless I was making decisions on my own, was another turning point, because I could have easily dismissed her and said, I know better than you do, because I've always wanted to become an athletic director. That's my dream job. I'm not going to give it up.
I'm doing it right.
But sometimes we need to listen to other people, and sometimes there are people who come into our lives. Sometimes it's an unexpected event or a moment in time. But these turning points are powerful influences and are defining moments in life. And if we only slow down and realize what happened to me today, or what's happening to me at this moment, do I have a choice, and which way do I want to go, and why do I want to go that way? When I would have never ended up running the Washington Speakers Bureau or founding it if I hadn't paid attention to those turning points in my life. I could have easily been doing something else. Maybe I would have been happy, and maybe I wouldn't have been happy. But I know I'm proud of what I accomplished, and anyone out there can be successful and accomplish something if they simply pay attention to these turning points.
Right.
The unique thing about Steve Bell, who was the first speaker we had, I remember I went over to his office to sign to to reach an agreement to represent him. And when I got over there, he said, "I'd love to let you represent me." This was our first speaker, so I shook his hand. I remember driving back from his office in Washington, D.C. to our office in Alexandria, our closet in Alexandria, and thinking that I had made a mistake. I didn't sign him to a written contract. And so when I got back to the closet, I tried to explain to my wife, Paula, why I hadn't signed him to a written contract. And I came up with an excuse by saying, well, what good would it do to hold him to a piece of paper if he's not happy? Now, that moment, that mistake at that time, that error in judgment for me turned out to be a defining moment, because Steve then went and told his friends, other Washington journalists, that if you don't want to sign a written contract with an agency and be held up for 2 years with no way to get out of it, you can go shake hands with these new little guys in town and walk out on them anytime you want. Within 6 months to 12 months, we were representing about 6 other Washington journalists. And that turning point there, that mistake, turned out to be, again, a defining moment for us.
So who were some of the presidents that you represented?
Well, we represented Ronald Reagan. He was the very first person. He was the one who took us from, we were 9 years old at the time, and he took us from where we were, which was kind of a middle of the road lecture agency, may have done well, maybe not have done well. And he took us, catapulted us to number one in the largest lecture agency in the world within 2 years.
I just visited his library a couple weeks ago here in LA.
Right, and we represented both the Bushes.
Okay.
And we represented the last 5 prime ministers of Great Britain, starting with Margaret Thatcher. Okay. We represent 7 secretaries of state. So, so we ended up representing hundreds of extremely well-known people, and having employees up to 110 people working for us, all because of those turning points.
I always loved your brochure. So I still have some files, some of my U.S. Chamber files. So I went back in there. I still have one of your brochures.
Well, yeah. And it was very important for us. As I said before, it's your branding. And I remember being so concerned about our brochures to make sure that they were quality brochures, because they, like me, when I talk to people, those brochures represented us and said something.
I always keep the ones I really, truly like, and I keep them in a file for reference when I'm creating something. And yours is one of them that I have in there.
Wow. So I'm often asked, how in the world, when people start out in business today and want to do something, think about for a moment of spending 14 months in a closet, a stationary closet, still worried about when we couldn't get out of the closet, just sitting there. We represented no one for 14 months.
Well, let me ask you this question. Let's fast forward now several years, because you started your business, you started the Bureau in 1980. So you've come to I'm sure, and I'm only presuming now, that you've come to the point where, or the Bureau has, that you're more selective on who you take on, who you're representing. So how does a speaker get a bureau to represent them?
Well, there's several ways. I think the most important thing is that you need to have a story. When I wrote this book, oddly enough, I never gave any speeches before.
Okay.
I talked to my staff and motivated my staff and explained what was going on.
Right.
But I had to stay behind my desk. I couldn't go in front of the speakers I was representing to go out there and speak, and I certainly didn't want to speak about them. And so I had to teach myself how to speak, just like others have to teach themselves how to speak to get a speakers bureau interested in them.
Right.
And in order to do that, I had to think about what was my story. What did life tell me? What uniquely do I have to teach to somebody else so they can understand something better about their own life? And so I think that's the number one thing. And then you have to practice it like you would be a musician. You have to be good at it, and you don't memorize things. You understand concepts, and you have to be real and relaxed. And I think always today, a speakers bureau won't be interested in you unless you get a videotape done. So they because they're putting themselves on the line, recommending you to other people. So that entire staff has to know I understand this speaker. I have confidence. I'm excited when I recommend this speaker. And then having that videotape in order to show the customers as well.
So I've heard some speakers bureaus say, don't call us, we'll find you. Do you think that's really good advice?
No, I don't think that's good advice for anything, really. I think I don't think you can be successful or accomplished in life unless you have the passion to do it. I sat in that closet for 14 months. So what kept me going for 14 months?
Right.
One thing I discovered was that passion is a lot more important than talent. And so that's why we can succeed in life if we have the passion to keep going and never give up. And so you can't sit back and expect something to happen to you. You have to do your best to make those things happen.
I totally agree, because if I were to sit here waiting for the phone to ring, there's going to be no activity unless I took action.
Right, and it all comes down to character too. I mean, it is who you are. You have to have good examples in your own life that you live up to. You gave a nice quote at the beginning. Well, that quote is somebody we would look up to because of what he said, and try to understand what he meant by saying what he did, what Churchill did.
Right.
So I think it's very important for us to have good examples in life that we live up to, and that good character comes through in no matter what we do, whether we're going to be a speaker or we're going to run a business on our own or work for somebody else. It doesn't make any difference. It's our character that counts.
It's still that character. Exactly. I always say, I can hire someone, I can train someone on how to do something, but I can never train somebody on building a really good character. So absolutely believe in that. Well, we need to take a really quick sponsor break, so just hang in there. We'll be right back.
Are you an entrepreneur looking for more qualified leads? Podcasting is a great way to do that.
The podcast you're listening to right now is produced by Turnkey Podcast, and we can do the same for you.
Over 100 million people listen to podcasts every month. 85% listen to the entire episode. Interview-based selling is 10 times more effective than traditional marketing campaigns.
Step into the new media space and let podcasting be your marketing, business development, and lead generation tool. Turnkey Podcast can take you from concept to launch. Instead of taking months, we can help you get there in as little as 30 days. After the launch, we do all of your editing, production, voiceover guy, royalty-free music. The bottom line is we're going to help you generate more qualified leads using podcasting. If you have a podcast already, we can show you how to better monetize it.
Go to turnkeypodcast.com/contact for a free consultation to learn more. Turnkeypodcast.com. You need more qualified leads for your business. Let us help you find them.
And we're back, and you're listening to Up or Out with WCONNIE. And joining us today is Bernie Swain, the founder of the Washington Speakers Bureau. In 1980, right from his closet, he became the largest lecture agency in the world. He represented American and world leaders, U.S. presidents, prime ministers, secretaries of state, journalists, authors, business leaders, sports legends, and achievers of all kinds. So, Bernie, we are back, and this is now time for the hot seat. This is where we ask you some questions to learn more about you. Are you ready?
Right. I'll do the best I can.
All righty. All right. Well, we start off easy. What is your favorite success quotes?
I think there was an person who inspired me in my life. His name was Lou Holtz. When I first met him, he was the coach at the University of Minnesota, later became the coach at Notre Dame and other schools. Yes. And Lou says in life that life is 10% what it gives us, but success is 90% what we do with it.
What we do with it. Yes, I know that quote so well. Notre Dame fan. Woohoo! Yes. Oh, great. So, do you know what you wanted to do right from the very start? Well, apparently you wanted to go into sports and sports coaching, and then you switched.
Yes.
So
yeah, I did. But what I learned along the line, going towards an athletic career, was I was working with people. So my adjustment from working with people, alumni and students and staff and faculty, and kind of mixing people together for one common goal, contributed a great deal to starting a company on my own and understanding people and having some values. And so I think no matter where we start off today, I think kids today are going to go into several different directions as opposed to when I started. I probably and my parents would have picked one job and stuck with it all their lives.
Right.
Today it's so different. But what makes us successful in the ability to switch jobs or start an entrepreneurial company on our own is the ability to have good character and to understand networking and to understand basically who you are as a person.
Yes, great advice. So what do you recall was your aha moment, the moment when you said, I got this, I truly know what it is that I'm doing and I'm living my passion?
I represented an amazing author, Alex Haley, who wrote an incredible book called Roots. And Alex used to come and sit in my office for hours at a time, and he would talk to me about family and relationships. It's a little bit about what I was talking to you before.
Right.
And Alex used to say to me, when an old person dies, it's like a library burning. And what he taught me was, don't just represent the people you have or just employ the people that are working for you, but to try and a little bit about them, because you can learn from each of them. And so he was the one who taught me about the turning points in life. He's the one who inspired me to write the book that I wrote about the turning points in the lives, because most people think that well-known people that I represent got that way because of money or connections or a silver spoon or something that they can't have in their own lives. Right. And quite frankly, it's just the opposite. Yeah. I wrote 36 stories about the personal turning points that are just like you and me, the things that happen in our own lives and how they handle those personal turning points.
Yes.
For example, Tom Brokaw, who was a journalist for NBC for 50 years, failed out of college twice. Yeah. And the question is, what do we do with failure? And what did Tom do with his failure that put him on a path for success that can be an example for us?
Yeah, and that's exactly where the difference is from someone saying they're a success and someone saying, I'm a failure. And I hate to even say that word. It's what do you do with that failure? Because we're all a failure.
Right. And we're not going to all be president of the United States or Secretary of State, but we can all be successful and accomplished and proud of what we're doing if we simply pay attention to those turning points in our lives.
Yes, great advice. Well, I want to thank you, Bernie Swain, for being here today. So how can our listeners find out more about you and what you're doing?
Well, I am on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a website called bernieswain.com, and on there's a 10-step procedure that you take to get a Speakers Bureau interested in you. So if you do have people out there that are interested in being speakers. Yes. And please have them. Anybody can contact me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'd be glad to answer questions about turning point in life or entrepreneurism or questions, because it's become, quite frankly, a passion of my own to try to help others to understand what I went through.
Yes, love it. And thank you for sharing that. And it's so hard to share. I know sometimes I'm not as forthcoming with sharing my stories of what has happened, but it makes us human, and it's who we are. So I want to thank you for putting that out there and letting everybody know that we're not all born with a silver spoon in our mouth. Right. If you work hard, you can make it happen. So that's all we got for today. And our time always goes by so quickly. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. You don't want to miss any of the good stuff. Check us out on our Facebook group, uporOutNetwork.com, and just become a member. And you're going to get lots and lots of information and tips on how you can find your success, how you can find your turning point in life, and achieve what it is that you want to achieve, no matter what that is. We're going to help you get there. So if you have a topic, that you want to hear about, if there's a guest that you want to hear about, let us know. Send us a note to team5@fightgroup.com. I'm Connie Fife. Thank you for being here today. And if there's something different that you could do to make a difference in your life or in the life of someone else, what would that be? Think about that. Until next time, be bold, be connected, and be unstoppable together.